Hello and welcome back to On Track GP, where today we are discussing everything from the good to the bad to the ugly that happened at the Miami Grand Prix. I'm here with Sam from Planet F1. Sam, welcome, first of all. Give me your overriding thoughts about the race. What did it leave you feeling when that checkered flag came? What were your initial thoughts?
Do you know what? Like, we did our watch log, obviously, and I was watching through that, and then on the way home, I looked at Twitter. And everyone was saying it was a really boring race, and I was thinking, where were you lot in Baku? Like, this was such a more interesting race than Baku. Like, at least we had overtakes and stuff. Like, yes, I think I was probably a bit of the opposite of what everyone's feeling, but yeah, I thought it was quite an interesting race. Like, I think Verstappen's charge from P9 up to the top was quite impressive, even if it is in a rocket car that is the RB19. But yeah, I think it was clear, like, the strategy was really key during that race. Yeah. Like, I think if you started on the hards and ended on the mediums, that seemed to be the better way around to do it, because you've just got that bit at the end where you're on quicker tires, they're fresh, and you can sort of just blitz up the field. And I think the drivers that did really well were the drivers that did that. I mean, I think if Perez had done the same strategy as Verstappen, he probably would have won the race. So he might be a bit annoyed. But yeah, I think personally, I thought it was an interesting race, but I could be wrong.
Yeah, on that Perez point, there was an argument saying that, they deliberately put him on the wrong strategy so Max would win. I think the counter argument to that is if Perez is on hards at the top of the race and he's got Fernando Alonso and Carlos Sainz behind him on mediums, there's a much more likely opportunity that they can get ahead of him early in those corners, and then he's got to fight on hard tyres and loses track position. So I think Red Bull probably did make the right decision, or made the only call they had to in going, we've got to go quick early on. But that benefited Max, and he did just a ridiculous job on those hard tyres. It was like, the funny thing with those overtakes, I don't know how you feel about this, but it just was like, oh yeah, he's doing another overtake then. Yeah, okay, that's it. Sixth, and he's won.
Yeah, I mean, I think no one was surprised. I think it was the only question people had was, is he going to finish P2 or P1? But yeah, I think you're right. Like, Red Bull, you were damned if you do, if you're down, if you don't. I think it was wise for them to split the strategies, and it just so happened that Verstappen's was the better one. Like, going in, they probably would maybe try to favour Perez because he's leading the race, stuff like that. But yeah, it just happened that it was a round. And you're right, like, they want to put Perez on a quick tyre, or else Alonso's going to get him in the first corner. Yeah. And then Alonso might start trying to build a lead. So yeah, I think it was the best they could do. And then I think it was just driver skill towards the end of it, wasn't it? Verstappen just blitzed past everyone. There was a good moment in the cool down room afterwards when he was watching it with Alonso, and he just looks back at Alonso like a knowing look, and he went, "Yep, I know, I saw you overtake me. We all saw it." And he was like, "You had DRS." He's like, "We're like, yeah, sure, Alonso, that made a difference."
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a great performance by them and the team, really.
Yeah, completely. Speaking of Alonso, very good race again. I mean, I read a stat the other day, 5 races, and he's got 15 points at every weekend. Obviously, Baku, he managed to get the extra 15, but make it up to 15 with the sprint race. But it was 75 points. What?
I know, yeah. Like, I think as much as we sort of now take Verstappen's brilliance for granted, like, these podium finishes for Alonso are just like, oh yeah, that's another one kind of thing. It's like the old days where it was like Hamilton, Bottas and Verstappen all the time, like just that constant free. Now we've got a new version where Verstappen did it again, but he's got Perez and Alonso with him. But yeah, like, another great drive. Like, it's hard to know where that Aston Martin car was this weekend, because obviously Alonso got on the podium, but then Lance Stroll had a terrible time. Like, he was out in Q1 in qualifying, never really got many places up the grid. I think, yeah, so it's hard to know if he had a bad day or if Alonso had a really good day in a weird way. Like, you can't get a good judge of what that car was like.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of talk going around. Is Alonso going to go 23-0 in qualifying with Lance Stroll? He's already 5-0. Do you think he'll do the whole way 23?
It's a long season, isn't it? Like, Alonso could have a crash. Alonso could have something that happened to him like Verstappen this weekend, where another driver makes an error and you lose out, and Stroll could have already set a lap. So yeah, I mean, it's looking likely at the moment. I think it's quite likely that he finishes ahead of him most races, if not all of them. But yeah, like, it's just, he's had a very good start. And I think Stroll sometimes gets unfair criticism. I don't think he's as bad as other pay drivers we've seen. But yeah, he's just sort of that step behind Alonso currently.
Yeah. Let's move on to Mercedes and Ferrari. It's just sort of, I mean, look, George Russell comes in 4th, misses out just with the podium, coming in 4th. Carlos Sainz in 5th. What do you make of what's going on generally at Mercedes and Ferrari? They kind of feel like they're sort of in the same bracket almost at the minute.
Yeah, I think you're right. I think they're just sort of accepting what they've got at the moment. I think they've both, well, Mercedes in particular have said they've got upgrades coming to Imola, and that's sort of been like almost sort of where our season starts is at Imola, which is crazy because it's what 6-7 races in. So there's a lot of lost ground. But yeah, I think P4 was the best that Russell could have hoped for. Like, and Howard obviously had that terrible qualifying, so he had work to do. But he was another driver that benefited from starting on the hards and being on those mediums late on, because he managed to cut through that top 10, not on the same speed and ability that Verstappen had, but yeah, with the same. He got up a few places, which didn't look likely at the start of the race. But yeah, I think you're right with both those teams. They're just sort of like nowhere. Like they're not attacking the podiums. They're not so far behind that they're struggling for points. It's just sort of like in that middle range where like they need to make that step forward. But the question is, can they make that step forward at enough pace to counteract Red Bull, who are also going to make a step forward, and Aston Martin as well going to make a step forward. So I think that's the problem. Yeah, you're probably right, but that's the problem with F1. It's like it's such a development arms race. Like everyone every day is trying to make their car quicker. So even if you like stand still for like a week, like you're going to be lost soon enough. So yeah, I think we'll see. I think this next race is going to be very interesting to see not only how the cars do, but how some of them might look. Like I think the Mercedes will look drastically different the next time we see it in the garage.
Yeah, very interesting. I mean, I was thinking the other day, can you imagine if the Red Bull team had never been born, right? They didn't exist. We would have the greatest championship race ever for the constructors, with three teams battling it out super close. Obviously, you've got one driver that's ahead in Alonso, but then his counterpart isn't doing so well. It'd be so tight. So
yeah, it would be. Yeah, exactly. Like I think that's the interesting thing about Formula One is like you can get excited about a battle for fifth. Like it's just interesting to see these two teams going at it. But yeah, you're right. Like we often get like a dominant team, and I think even in that scenario, like I think whichever team Adrian Newey was at was the team that's going to be Red Bull. Like he's like probably the most important person in that organization when they're building the car. So yeah, I agree. It's an exciting season if you just ignore who wins the race.
Yeah, we don't need to go maybe through all the other teams, but any other standout teams? Alpine obviously got a double pointer. Kevin Magnussen qualified fourth and got a point on the board for Haas finishing in 10th as well. Any other sort of standout performances from you from those other 6 teams?
Standout, not so much, but in the opposite sense, I think McLaren again had just an awful weekend. Like, it's routinely, and I was praising the strategists of Red Bull for doing that. I mean, what were McLaren thinking? Putting the drivers on the soft. Like, I think to do that, you'd have to have such a quicker car than they have. Like, fair enough, if Red Bull went on the softs, they could probably blitz past the grid and they could afford like another stop or an early stop. But McLaren, like, they put it on the softs, and the softs are just dead within like laps. Like it was a complete waste of strategy. Yes, Lando Norris got shunted by Nick De Vries in the back, but even if that hadn't happened, I don't think. Yeah, that was just something that got completely ignored. But I think even if that happened, I don't think that the McLaren had that much speed. It was just a dreadful race because as soon as they swap soft, the best they can hope for is like a late safety car or something to break it up, because otherwise their drivers going 50 odd laps on the hards. And we're praising Verstappen for going 40 or whatever he did on a Red Bull that's really good with tire day. McLaren not so much. They had to go so long, which is just why you never saw them if you're watching the TV broadcast.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. A shocker, 17th and 19th for McLaren is not good. And as you say, we were going this week. Hey, maybe a bit of momentum here. They could score a point or two, and they could really have been much further away from scoring points. Talking just generally about Miami before we wrap up and move ahead and look at Imola, what did you make of the driver entrances? Those big. Unfortunately, we didn't have Chuck Leclerc this time, which I was quite sad about. Not. And I've got to be honest, like I think there's a sense of like some people are like, oh no, why are we letting the Americans do this? I quite enjoyed it, but almost from a point of view of like enjoying how uncomfortable the drivers looked rather than enjoying the spectacle of the American money being pumped into it. How did you feel about it?
Yeah, I don't think any driver enjoyed being there. They all look very awkward as they come out. I just think it's weird. Like, can you imagine another sport where like 10 minutes before you kick off or whatever, like you've got to do this? It's just something like I can appreciate like all the stuff they do around the race, but like I feel like that like build up to the actual race should sort of be a bit sacred. Like, okay, just leave them to it. Like, I don't want to be walking. If I'm about to go in a car that drives 200 miles an hour, I don't want to be walking past LL Cool J and having to say something like what does Max say? Like, I'm bad qualified. Like, yep. All right. What do you want? I've said it about 1,000 times already. So like, yeah. But yeah, it was very American. I think. I mean, I dread to think what the Vegas race is going to be like. Is this supposed to be the toned down version? But yeah, we'll see. I'm sure they're already planning something
Yeah,
something like
my favorite quote was from the walkouts was Kevin Magnussen, bad boy turned good.
Yeah.
What?
That? No one's ever described Kevin Magnussen, the family man who's got like his kid in the paddock most week, as the bad boy turned good.
And you
I've
can even see on
never
his
heard
face,
that.
he was like, what?
Is that me? Have I cried at the wrong time?
Let's look ahead to Imola. I'm not going to ask you to make predictions because we've got a little bit of a way out, but just remind us, what can we expect from that Imola race? What's the track like? What cars do you think might perform well?
Well, I think this is potentially one of the most interesting races we've had probably at the start of the season, because a lot of teams have aimed for that point of their upgrades. Like, it's the start of the obviously we've had Baku, but this race is sort of the start of the European leg of races, which tends to be when teams feel more confident to try upgrade packages purely from a logistical base, because obviously their bases in Europe, it's much easier to fly out parts, it's much easier to fly out replacement parts if needed. So a lot of teams, I think I'm excited to see what Mercedes come up with, because like they've been talking all season about it's coming. It's a new concept or like a new layout, they've said. Like, so what that means, I'm excited to finally see. Like, they've been very coy on what exactly they've done. So like, yeah, I just think it's a time where a lot of teams have upgraded, and like we can finally see if any have made up some progress to Red Bull. Like, yeah, and the track itself is just a good track. Like, it's just obviously it's in Italy, so it's got that like historic feel, but it's also like a track you can overtake at, really, and like some good corners as well. So yeah, it's just a good race, hopefully.
Good. Well, it's not long. It's going to be like 10 or 11 days or something. And then I think it's a triple header as well. So 3 races back to back should be amazing. Thanks for watching, guys. Sam, thank you so much for your time. Appreciate it. Don't forget to smash up the likes, subscribe to On Track GP. And of course, we are still giving away a PS5. So don't miss out on that competition. We'll see you for the next one. Thanks, guys.
Competition time again. And here is a chance to win a brand new PS5. All you got to do is subscribe to On Track GP on YouTube.
Also follow us on Instagram at OnTrackGP. Make sure you like the competition post. It's pinned on Instagram as well.
You can win yourself this right now. What are you waiting for?
Can I enter? Or can I have a go?
No.